everybody. We are live in the Hall of Saurischian Dinosaurs with our tour guide, Andrew Epstein, and he's going to tell us a little bit about dinosaurs today. Take it away, Andrew.
Well, thank you. And I want to welcome everyone to the fourth floor of the American Museum of Natural History. What you're looking at is one of two large dinosaur halls in the museum. And we're going to spend a little time going through some of what's in there and maybe why it's in there. But understand this is only a very small part of what's available in the museum. And one thing you may notice immediately, besides all those fine dinosaurs, is there are people walking around. And the museum is indeed open. It's open to people with reservations, which are easy to get. And I would encourage you all to come. What you will not see is me walking around in the museum. Although I can visit the museum, giving tours live inside the museum is still a little problematic because it would involve getting people to huddle together and for me to breathe on them for an extended period. And we're just not ready for that. So we're very fortunate to be able to do it this way. So as we go along, I would encourage you to ask questions. And when you hear me make a mistake, you can snicker a little bit, but more importantly, make sure you correct them. And that'll all get to me. So we're going to start with a little bit about how this place is organized. These halls were redone in the 1990s. And as you look into the hall, we're looking south from the north end of the hall. There's a big black line on the floor. And that's what I thought we would start with. So yeah, just turn around. And you're going to see something on the wall here in this entrance hall. And that is a portion of the vertebrate tree of life. Animals with backbones like us. And the tree of life is like a family tree. And it shows relatedness. Where did I get my brown eyes from? Did I inherit it? And why do I look more like my sister than I do look like your sister? So we want to do that with other animals besides ourselves. And what you see is a tree of relatedness, about how best we can figure out how animals came to be the way they are and where they got their inheritance from. So all those animals up on the wall behind the glass are dinosaurs. And all dinosaurs come from a common set of characteristics that can distinguish them from other animals. And so the way we read this tree is we look down at the bottom. And down at the bottom, it tells us what all dinosaurs have in common. There are other things, of course, but to simplify it, we're going to say that all dinosaurs have a hole in their hip socket. To the left of the words, it has three distinct bones, ilium, ischium, and pubis bone. And you and I have the same three bones, but as long as we're more than 6 years old, the three bones come together without a hole in the middle. And that's enough for me to say dinosaur, not dinosaur. So as we pull back, you'll see the silver lines go to the left and right. And so on the right side, we have dinosaurs that all share a common characteristic, a grasping hand. And we follow it to the right, and we find more ways to narrow in on any specific dinosaur. So we have a three-toed foot, a three-fingered hand, and then as you go all the way to the right, as we move up, by the way, we're moving forward in time. So these different branching points happen at different points in time. And all the way up at the top of the right of the case, it says alive today. And there are dinosaurs that are alive today. And they are modern birds. And we know that dinosaurs gave rise to birds, and birds are a kind of dinosaur when we look at this kind of information. Now, for modern animals, we can look at molecular evidence and figure out what percent of our I have a certain percent of DNA in common with you, about 99.9%. I have a certain amount in common with a chimpanzee. I have a certain amount in common with an asparagus. But I don't have DNA available for those animals that we're looking at, the non-avian dinosaurs. So what scientists have been doing for a very long time is taking the evidence available, bones, the fossilized bones, and looking for clues like the hole in the hip socket, like the number of fingers, the number of toes, and many, many other, in fact, hundreds of other characteristics in order to figure out how they are, in fact, related. Now, there are models in that case that are older than the Hall in its present state. And straight ahead of us, up there, there is a ferocious looking animal. I think perhaps you might guess what it is. Maybe you can read it. It's Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this is a model of Tyrannosaurus Rex that was a very good characterization of what it might have looked like many years ago. But it is not a very good characterization of what we think today. One thing you will notice is that its head is up in the air and its tail is dragging behind on the ground. And that is one thing that we are very certain is not accurate. If it were to stand like that, it would probably injure itself by bending its bones in its tail and neck in a very uncomfortable way. But there are other things about that. So maybe we'll turn around. If you can ask questions at any time.
We
This
did
is
have
really
one
not
question,
scripted.
Andrew. One quick question,
Yes.
Andrew. Someone had asked about have there been any changes to this tree in recent years? I know that there was a big paper, a big splash a couple years back about some possible reorganization. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. So that's true. This hall opened in the 1990s, and that tree we're looking at is from the 1990s. And science is about taking new information, new ideas, and testing them. And so when we put this up here on the wall, we knew it wasn't the answer to all our questions. What we were saying is this is the state of what we can figure out. Some of it is better supported than other things, but this really is a good idea based on what we were standing 25 years ago. And that's correct. Fairly recently, there was a proposal to make a big change in the tree of life for dinosaurs. On the fourth floor, you can turn around. On the fourth floor, this is the Hall of Saurischian Dinosaurs, which means lizard-hipped dinosaurs. And the other large hall in the museum is the Ornithischian Hall of Dinosaurs, which means bird-hipped dinosaurs. So we're showing two principal trees coming off of that initial branching point, one lizard-hipped, one bird-hipped. The change that is proposed that is still not universally accepted is that some of these dinosaurs actually belong on different branches, so that the branching that we have in a very fundamental way is perhaps not the best way to sort out the descent of the dinosaurs. If we figure out that that is correct and we are wrong, we will do our best to update it with new information. We're not there yet, but I will tell you it will be very difficult. I mentioned the black line on the floor, and that black line is the trunk of the dinosaur tree of life. In this hall, the Saurischian uh, tree of life. And one of the curators is fond of reminding us that in science, you never put anything in concrete because things change as we learn more, as we discover more. as we find new ways to look at data that we already have, we come to new understandings. That's what makes the science so exciting. But that black line is, in fact, concrete. So if we need to move those lines around, we're going to have to be very clever about it. But as I said, we're really not ready to do that. But you see, there are silver lines embedded in that larger black line. And that is actually where the tree goes, on those silver lines arranged on the floor in front of us. And where we're stopped right now is what we call a node, a branching point. We mentioned it earlier. It says a three-fingered hand. And so what that can tell us is, as we move down this branch of the dinosaur tree of life, all these animals will have, or will have had, a three-fingered hand. It's a way of distinguishing one group instead of inheritances from the other group. And if you look to the right, we're going to look at a dinosaur called Allosaurus. And you can see it facing us. It's got its head down, but I want you to look at its right hand there. It's got three fingers on its right hand. And I can see three fingers. This is a very old mount. This is more than 100 years old. And it is showing the three fingers being used to dig at the skeleton, the backbone of an Apatosaurus. And if you swing around slowly, you will see a life-size Apatosaurus. And the curators had at the time had extra pieces, and one of the pieces of one of those vertebrae of the Apatosaurus underneath the Allosaurus actually has some scratch marks that look very much like predation, like some animal has scratched it either in killing it or more likely after it died. So we have some scavenging going on.
Hey, one quick question from
And
L. Gaines while we're talking
please,
about Allosaurus. Did Allosaurus have feathers?
did Allosaurus have feathers? I don't know, but I can tell you what the probabilities are based on information that we've learned mostly since this hall opened about 25 years ago. And the answer is almost surely it had feathers. What we know from evidence, although speculation happened before, but in the last 25 years, scientists have found many, many fossils from different places around the world of dinosaurs like these that have feathers preserved in the fossil. And you saw earlier that birds are modern dinosaurs. I know birds have feathers. And we see fossilized evidence that they're very close relatives. Dinosaurs like these have feathers. In fact, there's evidence of dinosaurs not very closely related to these dinosaurs that have feathers. So not all dinosaurs have been found with feathers. We don't know that all dinosaurs have feathers. But because where this Allosaurus fits on the dinosaur tree of life, and where a lot of the feathers have been found, and where a common, a close relative of this animal is modern birds, I would say it is almost certain that this animal had feathers at least some point in its life. But
Another,
having said that,
oh, I was going to say just
I
a
just
quick
want to point
vetting.
out to everyone that I am a tour guide. I am not a paleontologist. I am not a scientist of any shape, but this is what I understand.
A sort of adjacent question from Austin Lynn was, do we know what kind of texture dinosaur skin would have had?
We do have fossilized impressions of dinosaur skin, and I believe there's some evidence that actual dinosaur skin has been fossilized. So we know a little bit about it, and we have some examples on display up here on the fourth floor where we are now. And yeah, the impressions we kind of pebbly sort of texture. But I want to caution everyone. Remember, we can go outside, we can see modern dinosaurs alive, but these dinosaurs we cannot see alive, and we're learning more and more about them. But what their skin looked like, we have evidence, but we don't know what every part of the dinosaur looked like. We have some pieces here and there.
And one question, which I think actually will sort of it'd be good to answer about Allosaurus, but also about our next stop, which is everyone's favorite giant dinosaur, T-Rex. Are these casts of bones or original bones?
So that is one of the most common questions that we get in the museum is it real? And about 85% of what's on display on the fourth floor is actual fossil material. I can't tell you exactly, looking at it, which part is the actual fossil and which is not generally. I can't for some of it. But if you add everything together, about 85% is actual fossil. For instance, the Apatosaurus is about 80% actual fossil. The Allosaurus, I can't tell you with any certainty, but we will walk down and continuing down this branch of the tree of life of dinosaurs, and we see coming up on the right is Tyrannosaurus Rex. And our Tyrannosaurus Rex on display here is approximately 50% actual fossil. The head, that enormous head, is plastic, but the real head is close by. And you can see it on the left in a separate case. And we'll go up to the case. We'll look at the ferocious head. It's ferocious because it's filled with big, big teeth. Uh, so that is the actual skull of our Tyrannosaurus Rex. And that white stuff that you see inside is rock that the Tyrannosaurus was excavated out of, and not all of the rock has been removed. So rock is heavy, and fossils of this kind are rocks in the shape of what used to be alive. There's a replacement process that we believe takes place. So what you're looking at is mineral that is not bone generally. And so it's very heavy. If we were to mount it up with the rest of the T-Rex, we would have had to put a big column under it or heavy cables, and you wouldn't be able to see inside all those air spaces. So if we look at the plastic copy, it's the same head, but a copy of it, and you can see that the head is filled with lots of empty spaces. And people would ask about why are there so many empty spaces? And the obvious answer that I would tell people is, well, it doesn't weigh as much. You have this big eating machine with these big heavy muscles chomping down on these big sharp teeth, and you don't want to be lugging around any more weight than you want to. But a scientist published, or a group published a paper not very long ago that said another reason why there would be empty spaces in the skull. Maybe you can guess another reason to have lots of empty spaces. And this is something that, well, a camel does. It breathes through sinuses that have a lot of blood vessels in them. And it can actually cool off much more efficiently than you and I can just by breathing in and out. And these scientists are showing with some evidence that perhaps T-Rex did the same thing. We have this great big animal that can probably retain a lot of heat under certain circumstances. And how do you get rid of that teeth? I've never seen a bird sweat, but there are other ways of getting rid of heat. And perhaps that's what our friend the T-Rex did. So this is another example of new information. Is it 100%? Well, like most things, it's not. But I kind of like it. It makes sense to me. And I only read about it in the last week or two. So this is the branch of the dinosaur tree of life with how many fingers on each hand? Can everybody say it with me? 3. And how many fingers are on our T-Rex? It's 2. So does T-Rex belong here? Is it a relative, in fact? Have we made a mistake so fundamental that even in what we said 25 years ago, we got it wrong? How many fingers do you have? Do you have 5 fingers? Do you know there are people alive today that have perfectly functioning hands with 6 fingers? Are they really people? Do they belong on the tree of life with us? Are they mammals? Or is it just a little bit of a change in what genes are turned on and what happens during early development inside our mothers? It turns out that a number of digits is actually pretty easy to manipulate genetically, and the number of digits can change. So how do we know that 2 is the same as 3 as far as our organization goes? Well, once again, I can't say with certainty about almost anything, but all these other characteristics that are unsaid right now, but it tells us that, yeah, this fits in exactly with all these other animals. And there's something interesting about this. When this animal was found, there were lots of pieces missing. Although 50% actual fossil, the scientists 110 years ago had to start thinking about, well, how do we put in the missing pieces? And so you saw Allosaurus with 3 fingers, and my goodness, this looks like Allosaurus. So if you were here at the museum up until the 1980s, guess how many fingers were on our T-Rex? It was 3. And then someone found, well, this looks like the hand of a T-Rex and it's only got 2 fingers. And then they found another one. And then we were wrong, but we really were wrong. And so they had to get someone to get a ladder, send them up to the 4th floor, and yank off those extra fingers. Do you know what we did with the fingers? Do you think we threw them away and pretended that it never happened? Or do you think we put them on the shelf so that we could show off to everyone, to tell everyone how things change as we get more information? On the other side of the wall behind the T-Rex in front of us, there is an exhibit going on right now that you can see if you come to the museum about T-Rex. And inside that hall about new information that we've learned about T-Rex are the extra fingers that we pulled off the T-Rex 35 years ago. But you know what's not in the hall? What I just told you that I learned about 2 weeks ago. So should we close it up? Probably not. I like this question idea. Do you have more questions?
Yes, I do actually. So, a quick question from Samvit was T-Rex primarily a scavenger? It seems like he wasn't very fast and would not make a good stealth hunter.
So once again, I will say, and I'm going to answer all the questions if I'm honest this way, I don't know. What I will tell you is that this idea of either or is probably a very unusual case to be either or. When we look around at the world today, we think of animals that are hunters, like, for instance, a lioness. She is a huntress, and she is very, very good at it. But do you think if she sees a dead carcass, she's going to turn it down? A free lunch is a free lunch. You know what a hyena is, right? When I learned about hyenas, I learned that they were scavengers. It was only much later that I learned that many hyenas spend more time hunting than scavenging. So when we look at T-Rex, even before we examine any evidence at all to say whether it was one or the other, we can look at its teeth and the size of muscles that would cause those bones to grow so big in its jaw. And we could guess and make a really good educated guess, I would say, that it probably did both. like most modern animals that have the ability to eat meat the way the T-Rex did. Now, there is evidence that T-Rex was a successful hunter. And direct evidence is hard to come by, but there is a hadrosaur uh, fossil that is a animal that sort of looks like T-Rex in that it's got long legs and short arms, but it was a meat eater. I mean, a plant eater. It has very, very different teeth. And embedded in one of these fossils, there is a tooth from T-Rex. And there's healing taking place in the bone. So, how does that happen? It doesn't happen from an animal that's dead. So, at least in, well, you know, I can't call up all the instances, but we talk about that instance in the new T-Rex exhibit. There is direct evidence that it was a hunter. As far as being a scavenger, it would just be really strange if it wasn't also a scavenger. So, yeah, the first guess that you might have that it probably did both, the evidence, as far as I'm aware, seems to support that notion. So, what you're looking at here is actually a plastic copy of the lower jaw and allows us to get a little bit closer to the teeth, maybe. And what you'll see is some of them are really big, maybe 6 inches long, about 10, 12 centimeters long. And they extend in the jaw in order to support that. Some of them, so the teeth can be more than twice as long inside the jaw as what you're seeing. But what I want you to notice as we're getting in close, that some of the teeth are quite small. So what's going on? That doesn't seem to make sense. Well, I have teeth in my head, and when I was 5 years old, I had other teeth that are gone. But the teeth that I got as a child, I have to hold on to. But for some animals, the teeth they have are just temporary as long as they're alive. They keep growing new teeth. For instance, sharks notoriously keep growing new teeth. And some vertebrates, like very different from sharks, like the T-Rex, are growing new teeth all the time. We have fossil evidence of new teeth growing underneath the exposed teeth. So as the teeth get worn away, as they get pulled out in fights and hunting, as they just get worn out, there's another set of teeth coming in to replace them. So this idea of a jaw with big and small teeth seems to be common to T-Rex and other close relatives.
A quick question about fossilization and dinosaurs. Someone asked, given how rare it is for anything to be fossilized, does it make sense to assume that anything we find fossils of must have been fairly common?
Yeah, that's certainly something worth talking about. Um, right. So there's a whole part of paleontology that talks about those questions about how does fossilization happen? Why do some things fossilize and not others? And does what we find actually give us a clear picture of various population sizes in the past? Now, I'm just going to pass on this question. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know enough about it in detail to really talk about it. But there is information there, and we do have an idea. You know, I've read a little bit, but I'm not going to get into specifics because I really don't know enough. But it is something to be very wary about because fossilization is indeed a very, very rare thing. Um, but I'll just leave it there because I'll just start talking about things I don't know enough about.
That's fine. So let's go. We'll go to our last stop, which is I think you wanted to look at Archaeopteryx, right?
So an early question that you relayed to me was about feathers. And so what we have around the corner is we have copies of what are called slab fossils. They are impressions. In addition to the fossilized bones, we have impressions of feathers. These animals are Archaeopteryx. And by the way, you can see the camera person in the reflection there. You say hello.
Hello.
There you go. Um, and so we see a form that is very similar to modern birds. We have not only feathers, but we have wings. And these were found more than 150 years ago. Charles Darwin was around when the first ones of these were found. And so this connection with birds and other dinosaurs has been talked about for quite a long time. In fact, in this hall, we have modern dinosaurs. If you turn to your left and look up at the ceiling, you can actually see modern dinosaurs overhead. There is a small group of gulls flying overhead, and they belong in this hall because they are related to this kind of dinosaur. So I mentioned that this is the Saurischian Hall of Dinosaurs. The other one is the Ornithischian Hall of Dinosaurs, and that means lizard-hipped and bird-hipped. And here we have birds in the Hall of Dinosaurs and not in the bird-hipped Hall of Dinosaurs. Now, why is that? Well, back when they were naming these, they didn't understand what we understand today, and they actually misnamed them. And so we're just holding on to a historic artifact. We know that Saurischian, although the word means lizard-hipped, in fact, the birds belong in this hall because of the close relatedness.
Uh, Quick question was, do dodo birds count as dinosaurs?
Of course they do. Of course they do. So thinking about dodo birds makes me think about how smart they are. So how do we know how smart dinosaurs are? Well, including birds gives us a little bit of an insight. We know a little bit about the shape of dinosaur brains because the skull gives us an idea of the maximum size for the brain that'll fit inside the brain cavity. We know a little, and we can look the shapes of the brains, telling us a little bit about function. And we can look at modern birds, and we can test modern birds, and we can determine a little bit about their intelligences. So you said a dodo bird, and right away I think of as dumb as a dodo. But a dodo bird, last one died, a few hundred years ago. More than that, the idea that they're dumb comes to us a long time. Even Alice in Wonderland, dumb dodo bird. But dodo birds were related to pigeons. Just think of an overgrown pigeon. And they had really big brains relative for their size. And we know that birds are, in fact, very intelligent. And just recently, some scientists talked about the structure of bird brains, that we're learning more and more about how intelligent they are and how efficient their brains are, more efficient than mammal brains as far as the neurons, how closely packed they are, and how well they are able to, how well birds are able to decide things.
Great. Well, I think those are probably all the questions we have time for today. But thank you so much for giving us this tour, Andrew. Do you have anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I am one of 105 tour guides at the museum. We have more than 40 fossil explainers at the museum, and none of them are there today. But this is something that I hope you'll be able to. I hope you'll be able to visit the museum, and I hope before too long you'll be able to meet some of our colleagues, and maybe you'll be able to see some more tours like this in the near future. And I want to thank everyone for making this possible today.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.